The reason for Gaddafi's death was an event that's still ongoing called the Jasmine Revolution or the Arab Spring. They're both the same thing, but it just depends on which media source you go to as to what it's called. Most people in America call it the Arab Spring, but some call it the Jasmine Revolution. It started in Tunisia. Tunisia's right here. It's a very open-minded, I guess you'd say, liberal country. You see a guy down here who's got a cell phone. They're very open. The guy's wearing sunglasses. So these people are, they are regular people. But a guy graduated from college there back in November of 2010. And after he graduated college, he couldn't find a job because employment was ridiculously high, up in the 20% range compared to 8% like it is here in the U.S. And so he, out in the middle of the street in the capital city of Tripoli, ran out, yelled, and said that, I can't find a job and I'm sick of the government not doing anything about it. And then he set himself on fire. And he died. But it kind of caught people's attention of, hey, what is this guy's cause? What is he doing? And so they started kind of paying attention to what's going on and said, hey, if this guy's, speaking up about this, maybe we should do something about it too. I just realized this guy back here in the background is wearing a Michigan State shirt. So they started gathering together and started protesting the government en masse. You see, this is a huge group of people. And they started protesting the government and asking for the president to resign or to do a better job, one of the two. And he said, I'll do a better job, but he never did. And eventually they forced him out of office because enough people hit the streets saying, it's time for you to leave. Game over, buddy. You see it right there. So it started with the protest of that and of police corruption. And Tunisian president resigned. Other countries of the region saw this and said, hey, we could do this too. We could protest, we could hit the streets, and we could force our terrible leader to resign too. The most notable of these was in Egypt, because Egypt is the most populous. Most people live in Egypt than any other country in the region. And so Egypt started hitting the streets, and at one point 11 million people in Egypt were protesting. That's out of 77 million people that live in the country. 1 out of every 7 people in Egypt was protesting. In some countries, and she's trying to spell massacre here, but the governments fought back against the protesters, sending out the army to kill the protesters. The massacre tells your savage regime. In other words, what you're doing to our people is telling about how bad our government is and how bad of a job you are doing of ruling our country. So this is in Bahrain, and they're hitting the streets protesting against the rulers there. There have been protests all over. Every country that's lit up has had a protest, and that's basically every country in the region. Some of them have been very small protests, 20, 30, 40 people. Some have been 11 million people in the city square, and they've ranged everywhere in between. In Libya, they actually got so fed up with their leader, Muammar Gaddafi, that they decided to actually fight against the government there. And so they had rocket-propelled grenades, which is what this guy has in his hand here, and some help from NATO air forces to fight against the Libyan army. And so they're fighting against Libya because the Libyan government is taking a lot of the oil money that the country gets from selling oil rights to companies, and they're putting it in, Gaddafi was putting it in his own hands, giving it to his wife and to his kids and to their college funds and everything else, but not giving it to the people of Libya who deserved it. And so they finally hit the streets, got some guns, got some rocket-propelled grenades, and started going to war against Libya. And it took them about 7 or 8 months to do it, but they finally caught Muammar Gaddafi and they killed him. The people of Libya caught and killed their own president. and now there's a new Libya, Libya that is still kind of searching for its own identity. So when the issue a couple of weeks ago with the video of Muhammad came out, there was a group of, I guess you could call them terrorists, who marched on the American embassy in Libya and killed our American ambassador along with some military. Now, that's not typical of Libya as a whole. And after the Libyans found out it happened, they went and searched for that mob because they wanted justice brought to them. Because the Libyans, in general, understand that, hey, America is our friend. They give us money. They helped us overthrow our terrible leader. We need to thank them and appreciate them, not try to kill their ambassadors. It's called presidents to resign. Other presidents have said, well, I'm not going to seek re-election. Cabinets of presidents have been fired. New elections have been called for. Constitutions have been edited. And it's gone on in lots of different places. Here you see some protesters, I want to say in Yemen, maybe. One of the major issues has been economic reasons, high unemployment, a lot of people that just can't get jobs. They have college degrees, but they can't get a job in their home country. Other problems include high food prices, government corruption, youth who are educated, who know how to rally together, a lack of oil money to soothe the tensions. The money's not going to the people, it's going to the government instead. And it's making the people mad. One of the strange things is social media. Twitter was used throughout Egypt to say, hey, we're going to march on this date at this time, everyone meet there. And the message got out through Twitter of this is what's going to happen. And so social media has helped cause these revolutions. Another thing that came out was the WikiLeaks notes. And WikiLeaks were all these classified government documents that the Americans had, that a guy released them onto the internet. And so these other countries are reading about what kind of backdoor deals America's doing with these leaders that aren't really the greatest of deals, but it's to keep them in power for some specific reason. This is Egypt. This is Egypt last summer 2011 or spring of 2011, when they're hitting the streets and they're protesting, saying our president needs to resign because he's not doing a good job. He'd been president there for 30 years, and no one could vote him out of office. There was no ability for the people to say, we don't like our president and we need to kick him out of office, let's get him out. Every 4 years, we have the opportunity to vote or keep our president if they're up for re-election. Egypt didn't have that choice. So that's what they were complaining about. The results, well, it's caused nervousness in other autocratic countries, other countries where the government kind of selects who's going to rule the country instead of the people selecting. And so China was a little nervous about all this. They banned some of the stories. They cracked down on social media. They cut down on free speech on newspapers and videos being released. There's a big dark cloud hanging over Egypt and Tunisia about what does the future hold. It shows how social media and social activism can cause great things. But it could lead to more media restrictions in other countries, because you notice those people, they made signs. The signs were in English, and they were saying to America, hey, look at us, we want your help. So that Americans would say, hey, we need to help those folks. I'm calling my senator, congressman, representative, somebody, and telling them that we need to help those people in Libya or Egypt or wherever. Egypt is perhaps the best country economically of all those in Africa. It has very close ties to Europe. It's not very far from Greece. It's home to the Aswan High Dam, which created this large lake called Nasser Lake, or Lake Nasser, that's provided a lot of water for farmers in this region. The water is vital in this region, so it's very important. Egyptian cotton is graded as like the highest grade cotton in the world. And if you go to your finer linen stores, you'll find Egyptian cotton. Egypt also has a lot of land, and so they welcome in hazardous waste disposal from other countries. Oh, you have old plutonium you want to get rid of? Well, just pay us some money. We'll bury it out in the desert. Egypt also sells its tourism very well, things like the Sphinx and the pyramids and all these other great sites that you can go to in Egypt. They sell those, and so a lot of people go to Egypt to go see these things. It's also home to the Suez Canal, which connects the Mediterranean to the Red Sea and later the Indian Ocean. It provides a shortcut from the Mediterranean to India or China. And most Egyptians, over 90% of Egyptians, live within 20 miles of the Nile River because it's so dry further out away from there.